Hi everyone, welcome back to Answering Legal's 2023 Law Firm Summer Reboot Camp. I've said this a lot today. I am Nick Werker. You're sick of me. That's okay. We're moving along here to our second panel here on Legal Marketing Day, and for this conversation, we will be discussing the future of legal marketing with leading voices from the community. Joining me for this conversation, as they've just introduced themselves, is Crumiller's Jacob Eidinger, Ashby & Co.'s Consulting's Lee Watts, Myrland Marketing and Social Media's Nancy Myrland, LMA International President Roy Sexton for 5 more months. Bespoke, it's my job to cheer up Roy after his board meeting. Bespoke Marketing Partners, Toni Wells. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to obviously get into AI shortly because we have to. But outside of AI, I want to ask you all, what is one thing or trend going on in legal marketing right now that's really grabbing your attention?
I was thinking about this, and for me, it's more of an operational standpoint. So not so much on the technology end, but just the return to work, and how people are dealing with that, how law firms are dealing with that. At first we were kind of like, oh, everybody can work from home. Then we went, oh, you got to be in 2 days, these 2 days a week. And now that seems to be creeping, and people are making employment choices because of that. I think that has a really great effect on law firm environments and the talent that you have, which, then affects a lot of other things. So I would just say outside of AI and tech, just kind of general operations return to work. So that's more what a lot of my folks and clients are talking about.
I was going to say what I'm seeing a lot of, and I didn't do a proper introduction of my company because I thought we were just testing mics and things, but I'm getting more requests about from lawyers, law firms, about really attorneys owning their personal brand and linking that to social media, where, there was a time where attorneys were like, I'm not doing social, I don't understand it, I'm not engaging in it. But now there is I think they're seeing the value of carving out your brand and using social media as a leverage for it. So lots and lots more of that.
If I could just jump in, I totally agree with you, Lee. I think, especially since the pandemic, we've really seen the lines between personal and professional become greatly blurred. That's in part thanks to social media. It's also thanks to things like remote work and us all getting a literal window into each other's homes. And so this is just the reality that we're living in now. I think people really want to do business with people that they like and that they trust. And part of that factor is getting to know them on a more personal, human level. To your point, I'm really fascinated right now by this trend of lawyers becoming famous on TikTok and other short form video platforms. Just last month with LMA, we wrapped up a program that I created last year called the 21 Day Social Media Challenge. Nancy and Roy both served as moderators for that program. And we talked a lot about short form video and how lawyers are capitalizing on this moment to really accelerate their personal brands. We're particularly seeing it in the B2C space, where firms are marketing directly to consumers. Some notable practice areas include criminal defense, personal injury, and immigration is a big one as well. But yeah, I think firms and individual lawyers specifically are seizing on this opportunity to reach a really wide audience and inspire the next generation of legal consumers and also the next generation of lawyers. We're seeing a lot of big law attorneys making it big on TikTok as well. So I don't use TikTok personally, but I'm following it professionally, and I think we're going to continue to see strides there.
If I could tag team on what both of them just said, I always struggle with this question because I feel like the old man in the crowd anymore. I feel like what's new is what we should have been doing all along, and I want to caution any either attorneys interested in marketing or legal marketers watching, stop looking for the silver bullet. Nancy and I had an exchange on LinkedIn a day or so ago about people get so obsessed about the algorithm. The algorithm's changed and I'm going to game it and I'm going to, you know what? what is working is authenticity, and whatever your version of authenticity and what channel you want to use to do that is how you're going to connect with people. And if anything, I think the pandemic stripped away a lot of the pretense around how attorneys can engage with clients. It used to be, I'm taking them golfing and I'm going for a fancy dinner, I'm sponsoring someone, no one pays any attention to your logo at the rodeo, I'm sorry. But they will pay attention to you connecting with individuals saying, I see you, I see what you're doing, I see your work, I'd like to learn more about it. And those are the people who will then pick up the phone and hire you as an attorney. And we as marketers, if we have to think on scale, we have to think about tools, brand, resources that we supply a group of attorneys. But if we can get to the point where we are marrying the coaching and things that Lee and others do so well with what we do as marketers to say, individualize this to connect with the people who mean something to you, that is going to be effective marketing in this space. It always has been. We've been told it is, but we were told to plan the picnic and plan the golf outing and all the stuff that was not about authentic connection. It was performative. It was about showing off your golf clubs. It was showing off what golf course you belong to, as opposed to I'm individually connecting with you. So I don't get jazzed about certain changes in technology unless they can benefit an authentic conversation between an attorney and a prospect.
I completely agree that the pandemic, if those that thought that the legal profession was sort of in a time machine backward and lagged behind the rest of companies and firms that were not in the legal profession, which we do tend to do because we're a cautious profession, the pandemic flip-flopped that. And all of a sudden it was a time machine going forward. And what happened is that things that were unacceptable before became acceptable. And just like you just said, Jacob, I mean, the conversations that I was suddenly a part of were, my lawyers are very nervous because they can't get close to their clients anymore, and so they're coming to me and asking me for LinkedIn training. Can you help? I mean, of course, the answer to that was of course. But I think it put us into a world that did not exist before, where certain things were begrudgingly acceptable for a time, and now they've moved to acceptable. And, which the studies, the Green Target study, one of my very favorites, that showed these drastic, 15 percentage point move in the positive direction for GCs and C-suites, saying that they valued LinkedIn, and they've even valued our recommendations on LinkedIn and who we were connected to, who lawyers are connected to. So I think all of a sudden we're in a world where, we have to say, thank heavens. You just talked about personal branding. Thank heavens that this awareness is there, that these things are important because they are. And the basics are the same. As Roy just said, the basics are the same. The vehicles might be changing, or we might be adding to them, which creates pressure in itself too. But we have to still know somebody's going to love doing short form video, and somebody's going to think that's just the scariest thing in the whole wide world. Somebody's going to think, oh, it's okay, I can sit in front of a microphone and jump on Riverside like you're doing today, Nick, and I don't mind recording a podcast. So I think what we have to do is stay aware of what's going on and stay aware of all of the tools, because who are they going to come and talk to and ask questions of when they see somebody or a firm down the street or across the country or the globe doing something that they're curious about? They're going to come to everybody right here that I'm seeing in front of me. So, long story long, I just think the tools might be changing or might be becoming broader, but I think the basics will never, ever change. It's all about relationships.
I'm glad to hear that's your answer, for a multitude of reasons. Number one, because I have the gift of gab, so I can do this.
Obviously, I do too.
Yeah. Number two, I went golfing a couple of weeks ago, and I can no longer play any sort of golf whatsoever, so don't take me on a golf outing. I will embarrass the both of us together. And I'm interested because we're talking about relationships, and I'm going to talk about taking the human element out of it, which is AI.
Hey, Nick, before you do that, can I say two things?
You can say.
This is indicative of what we're talking about. Lee, while she's on this panel, just posted a quote from me on LinkedIn and tagged me about this summer boot camp. And that's such an effective technique, just to say, I see a colleague, I'm sharing something they thought, I am now going to repost it. That's the kind of stuff that we can teach people to do, because it just made my heart happy. Lee makes my heart happy. I love her, but those are the kinds of things we want to teach our attorneys to do. And I want to make one other quick comment, because I am one who sometimes digs my heels in around things like Clubhouse a couple years ago. I'm sorry, everybody. And AI right now, not that I'm agnostic about it, I'm just like, I don't know what I don't know yet. But I also think we have to be careful we don't dig our heels in too much, because 10 years ago when I joined LMA, and Jacob alluded to this, my first foray was into the social media shared interest group. And I remember those days, and LMA looked down its nose at social media and digital, and there was feedback given to people who were part of that group. You're out there too much. You're too present. Why are you so self-promotional? Why are you sharing other people's content? What are you doing? Could you stop doing that? You're sharing content that we're selling elsewhere. And 10 years later, it has moved from maybe a marginal function to some and central to who we are and what we do. And people like Jacob have taken that mantle up, and they're doing great work. And that's what happens, and it can happen in the blink of an eye. It can happen over 10 years. But we have to not fight ourselves first on what we need to do before we can then connect with our attorneys and teach them the trick. So, I did just come off a board meeting, so I'm in that insular LMA mode, and I hate that. But by the same token, we can be our own worst enemies as marketing professionals, poo-pooing something else that somebody's excited about, when we really should be open-minded to it and say, well, what is this? Is there opportunity? Let's exert caution. Let's make sure we're ethical about it, but let's do the best we can with it. So now I will come down off the soapbox. Maybe.
I'm always happy to hear you soapbox. I'm not going to lie. So I'll go back to what I was saying, to your point, because I'll give you an example of what I was skeptical about, and then even though I was proven right, I sort of have this skepticism around AI. We're big into marketing. A few years ago, you would go to marketing conferences and they would tell you voice is going to take over everything. If you're not optimizing for voice search, you're going to get left behind. Nobody uses voice search, man. Are we really doing that? The Internet of Things is cool. Alexa works, Siri works, but I don't sit around talking to my phone all day. I still type it in. And I was like, oh, I'm so right. I was so right about this. And I'm taking the same approach with AI instead of, doing what Roy is talking about and being agnostic and trying it out, right? So I'm curious what you all see in AI tools now and in the future in the legal marketing process.
Nick, can I just for a moment, just to show how different, from, a foot and a half away, how different people can be. I hate typing in search now, because I've become so accustomed to talking to Google, and because my phone is right there, and that's the only way I like to search. And so I think that voice search is still really important. And an article I just read, I think this morning or yesterday, the days blur sometimes, that I was reading about artificial intelligence, is that because of voice search, that a lot of the results that are going to be coming up in these search results pages are, we're going to be doing more of those searches vocally, and a lot of those searches are going to be what people have put in content and in websites, no different than what we talk about with Google search results today. So I wouldn't give up yet on voice being important for search, but I'm not trying to be contrary with you. I just wanted to say that we're all so different in our habits.
Wrong. Voice
no,
search,
I didn't say you were wrong.
Voice search definitely doesn't work for me because I have my I don't know what it is. Every time I get frustrated, I'm like the guy who can't get through to the operator on the robotic. You call Walgreens and you're trying to get your prescription. I can't.
Oh, that's annoying. Yeah.
That's me. I don't know what it is.
You asked about AI before I so rudely interrupted you.
You didn't. No, you took me on. I'm happy to be
didn't really.
conversed with. Does anybody have any opinions on AI in the legal marketing process, though?
I have a lot of opinions about AI, so I'm happy to pick up the microphone. First of all, I think it's obvious that AI is creating entirely new workflows, and it's even creating new jobs around things like prompt engineering and the automation of certain tasks, like even legal tasks, or the automation of content marketing. And I think that the law firms that embrace this are going to gain a serious advantage over the law firms that don't. And, from a marketing perspective, I think the most obvious use that AI is playing right now is turning law firms into a content machine, where you're scaling your content using generative AI tools like ChatGPT to create blog posts and social media content and website content. But there are other potential use cases as well that are not, that haven't quite emerged yet. So you can use AI to actually improve the quality of your content. Some firms are using Grammarly. Grammarly has some really fantastic AI tools to help improve the quality of your writing and also generate some new text or help you write better posts. I'm also there's this tool I'm really fascinated by right now that Axios has come out with. It's called Axios HQ. It is an internal communications platform. I don't use it, but I've spoken with the folks at Axios about it, and I think it's really interesting. Basically, what they're doing is taking, a law firm's newsletter content and distilling it down into an easily digestible newsletter in Axios's what's known as their signature smart brevity style. So if you've ever read an Axios newsletter, you're familiar with this writing style. And so what Axios is doing is taking this formula that they've created and they've tested and that works, and helping other companies and firms apply it to their own internal communications. It's helping them scale their content and also creating messaging that's better resonating with their audiences. Mm-hmm. So this is just one tool that's doing this, but this is one example of how AI is actually not only helping firms scale their content, but making their content better given the right inputs. There's other, uses for AI, automation of low-level marketing tasks. Imagine if we could just completely do our chambers and partner submissions using generative AI. That would save a lot of people, I think, a lot of time and heartburn. It can be used for competitive intelligence. It can be used for recruitment intelligence, sort of using ChatGPT like a search engine. So there's a lot of uses that law firms should consider when it comes to AI, but you have to be very, very cautious about it as well. And happy to talk more about the pitfalls, but I think I think I've spoken for long enough. So I'm curious to hear other people's thoughts on this.
Jacob, I agree. I literally use AI every day, and I also want to make sure we differentiate between attorneys using AI and law firm marketing people using AI. So I'm not for attorneys just playing around and trying to do that. Like, that needs to be vetted out. But I sometimes, especially as a consultant, and I don't have someone next door to me all the time where I can just bounce ideas off of, I use it almost as a brainstorm tool, and just to get an outline going, get my thoughts going on a specific topic, get my thoughts for my social media, for my just all the things that you mentioned. So if nothing else, as marketers, use it to really get your thoughts together, save time, get a jump on some things, and test your writing a little bit. And also, I just want to say this as well. Again, being in legal marketing for so many years, it's always been kind of like this underlying joke, like legal marketing is always behind the other marketers. We're never like out front, and I don't want to do that with AI. I don't want to be reactive to it. So I think play with it now and figure out how you want to use it so we can be in the game now and not reacting later.
Yeah, agreed. It's interesting because I think when we think of all the service providers that our lawyers do use, the databases they go to for research that are today considered reputable and that they wouldn't get in trouble for, because that the data that's been put into those is sound and it's solid and it's been fed with quality material. So as each of those, and they will, each of those vendors puts in or builds in artificial intelligence tools, chat tools to their products so that the questions can be typed in directly and there's nothing outside of their database that's going to spit out, then the trust factors will grow for lawyers to use that kind of content. It'll just, as we're talking about for marketing and communications folks, making it more efficient. I think we will also get there with lawyers. I think it's just isolating the data so that it is more quality. And also, one of the applications that I really like that I've been reading about lately is, think about all of the content that a law firm has on its website. So much thought leadership and in every format. And to be able to put a chat bot on there so that somebody, if they're curious, can come to that website and just ask a question and say, what are the best ways, or what does Senate Bill 745 say about what we've been doing, for the last 15 years in, the agricultural, to make it as minute and as focused as we want. And all of a sudden it'll spit back every piece of content that person has typed in. So we've then removed the friction for people who are looking for specific information that then your lawyers can be, the bearers of that good news. So I think it has very exciting applications. Obviously, we've been using artificial intelligence for 15 years or more in law firms, and we just didn't call it that, and in the world, and we just didn't call it that. Amazon is full of artificial intelligence. I think I'm with Jacob. I'm pretty bullish on it. I'm just cautious. I'm like Roy in that I will jump on a bandwagon because I might think what I always say is it's my job to break things so that you don't have to. And so I tend to be a little bit more aggressive in checking something out just because my gut often tells me whether something is not a good bet right off the start, or if I need to give it more time, or if it's great and everybody should jump in. But I'm excited about it. I just am cautious.
And I think we almost do ourselves a disservice as marketers talking about AI in the abstract. We're talking about specific examples here, but a lot of the news of this year is AI is thrown around as this ominous thing that's looming, and we've all said we've been living with it for years. We've got Siri, people have had it already. And I tell this story a lot, and people are sick of me saying it, but when they were building Disneyland, I guess, there was a flower bed between Main Street and Tomorrowland. And people were walking through the flower bed, and the gardeners came up to Walt Disney and said, we need a fence around this, and he said, no, we need a sidewalk there. And I feel like sidewalks are happening around us, and I think we're all saying in different ways is be attuned to them, avail yourself of them, and work them in to the brand and the culture that makes sense for you, but be smart enough to know how they work so you can integrate them in a way that does not seem daunting. The reason social media was so hard for us to get sold to the attorneys is we came at them like, social media! They freaked out. Well, when they had nothing else to choose, they took the sidewalk. And I feel like this is another version of that. And we know firms are putting in place moratoriums on AI. And how are you going to navigate that? And I think a sensitivity here, because I feel it myself in my age. I like writing. I like it. It's not something I hate doing. So if somebody's saying to me, and I tried this with one of my movie reviews, I put it in a ChatGPT and what came out was garbage because I wasn't using it right. But I thought to myself, I still like the craft of putting the words together the way I want to do them. So an attorney, even if it's for marketing purposes, might say, well, what's happening to our ownership of the written word? And are the robots just going to be talking to the other robots? Who's reading this stuff? Or other robots reading the robot stuff? It gets to a point. What's the point if we aren't still communicating? So I liked the point of Lee made, start with an outline, but make it your own. But if it gives you a jump start, get you where you're going, it's just, I think when we talk about it like a silver bullet and it's going to fix everything, that's when people tune out or make mistakes or people use it unethically, and that's where I guess I come from.
Yeah, and I like the idea of the jump start, as you said, and to Lee's point too, because it's such a huge function of our industry, which I don't think will change, is time. We're all about, especially with our lawyers' time and our own time and the management of time and wasting time, that's such a huge function. So, Jacob, I love how you outlined some of the uses, because I think about all of that as time saving, right? Like, and even when I was in-house as a legal marketer, I would do my best, even if I didn't know about a topic intimately, to do a draft, for a lawyer, just, if it was more of a marketing type piece for their practice, I would do a draft because I always thought it was important to give them something to react to. And so imagine if I had tools like this, I think, I could have done a better draft, maybe quicker. And so I think it really will, it can be used, for good and really efficiency and all the things that we actually value in this industry.
I totally agree with you, Toni. And I mean, beyond AI helping us save time and also, needing to still review content that's written by generative AI and adding that human element back into it, there's also a huge ethical pitfall where generative AI may be actually introducing misinformation into our content. We've all seen that case with the lawyers in New York who used ChatGPT and cited bogus cases in a brief. And that's a pretty extreme example, but I think we've seen that right now the technology is not quite there yet. It's not processing information in the same way that the human brain does. And then sometimes it actually invents information that doesn't actually exist. So as it stands right now, if you are using generative AI to enhance your content marketing efforts, everything needs to be carefully vetted, everything needs to be carefully proofread, because it's just not there yet.
Right. Agreed. This is so early. I mean, the generative AI, ChatGPT made everybody aware of it because it launched on November 30th, which in the grand scheme of even digital marketing is just like it's a baby. So you're right, Jacob. And then everybody jumped because they wanted their product on the market as well. And it's brand new. So I think we can serve as explorers and testers, and we can become really smart on a lot of this and stay up to date on it. But I think what will be respected is that we're also very discerning. And, it goes back to what you said, Roy, and you've even said it too, Jacob, that we're also discerning. We can also say, you know what, I've been around long enough. My gut is telling me that Clubhouse is not going to make it. They've just cut off half the market, meaning Android users. So you've just, number one, you've just too much friction. People can't get in. There's a problem here. Or in this case, I'm a little worried about Threads because it has slowed down. Whatever it might be, which means we have to either spend some time investigating and researching, or we just have to pay attention to people who are doing that for us so that we can, get inside their brains and see what's going on. So I think the more that anybody who's listening here, Nick, all of your guests, can just apply those principles to say, yeah, I'm going to try to figure this out because I know that's what's expected of me, but I'm also going to let them know that I'm cautious and I'm discerning and I'm looking for the business case in a lot of these things. Yet I'm enough of an explorer that I am a little bit ahead of it. I think that will serve all of us in the long run.
And I think if we remember the plight of the in-house marketer, I've done consumer-facing marketing. That has its own challenges, but you have a lot more liberty to embrace new channels and see how they work and measure them and come back and say they're working or not. You're going to have two extremes in your organization. You're going to have the person who calls you the minute Threads launches and says, "What's our plan for Threads?" And you're like, "I'm going to see if I can use it, if I like it. I kind of do like it, but I'm with it, Nancy. I'm like, let's see how this works out. I like it better in Clubhouse, I'll say that." But then you have the other extreme that still doesn't have, they have the ghost avatar on LinkedIn because they're afraid to put their picture up. So we have a unique challenge if we're in-house, or even those who are coaching attorneys. They are going to be on a different continuum. At the end of the day, they get the reward for the business they bring in, for the most part, in the business model. Not always, but most law firms, it's generally how it is. So we still are in this role of coach and consigliere, almost like a fashion designer or something, to say, what works for this person and their attitude, and do I have the right tools in my toolkit that run the gauntlet from the very conservative with a lowercase c to the very progressive, and can I bring those things to those attorneys to help them get their voice out in a way that will bring business into the organization?
I finally had a coming of age moment where, and this is embarrassingly true, but a member of my team came to me and said, should we join Threads? Should I make a company profile on Threads? And I said, what's Threads? And I had no idea what it was. He's like, just think like Mark Zuckerberg made Twitter, because obviously all the crazy stuff that's going on with Twitter. I was like, yeah, sure. I'm not on Threads. I've never seen Threads. I don't know what it is. I know we're on it. If it's just like Twitter, I don't see it as that new, but maybe I should do something about it. I don't
It's
know.
like if Instagram and Twitter had a baby.
So is it fun though?
Except that it's evolving. It's not as visual yet. But it's a conversational platform.
In your defense, Nick, Threads is new as of like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So you could just chalk it up to you took a long vacation and now you're just getting caught up.
I wasn't on vacation. I'm just out of the loop.
You have a lot to do, and that's no different than anybody else here. Today, there's a lot going on, and it changes on a weekly basis. So you shouldn't even feel odd that you didn't know what it was.
I feel a little better. I appreciate you guys not embarrassing me.
Well, and I think we also have to caution ourselves against the hyperbole. Everyone's like, what's the Twitter killer? There's no Twitter killer. If we look at the history of America and industries that were big once that aren't, Sears just didn't implode overnight.
Right.
It took time. When people started shopping elsewhere and Sears got a little dated and they didn't stay up to date with things. And we're seeing that unraveling, no pun intended, with Twitter. And we're seeing other things enter that probably won't kill Twitter completely, but there's probably something else altogether a year or two from now that some 12-year-old's inventing that we're all going to go, oh, that's where I want to spend my time. It's not about what's the corollary to Twitter. And I'm even now with Threads, I'm like, okay, I got one more thing to go share here, share here, share here. And I'm like, which one of these things do I want to stop fooling around with? We just naturally find the sidewalks and we go elsewhere and we go, whatever happened to Sears? Whatever happened to Toys R Us? Whatever happened to Kodak? Whatever happened to the CD?
Blockbuster.
It doesn't, like this, it slowly degrades, and then we find ourselves in another place altogether. But again, we have to be the ones to go, I see some forks in the road and I'm kind of assessing all of them. That's the one I kind of think is the one, but I'm going to keep all of them in my dashboard.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be, you're right, Roy, it doesn't have to be a Twitter killer to be successful. And when you think about it, if Meta owns everything that it owns, and right now they're, in some ways being mildly successful, a few of them, but think about WhatsApp, think about Facebook is having a few issues, but look at the numbers that are still there. Instagram's numbers are still healthy, and then they have yet another product on the market. They are probably at this point okay that they're not a Twitter killer. There are probably a lot of people they would like to leave over on Twitter, and they hope that they never find their way to Threads because they're so toxic. So I don't think I agree. We don't have to look at everything as something killer. It might just be another tool. And I think the last, I'd say 5 years or so have shown us that social media is going to be splintered now. I mean, when you talk about all, voice and short video apps that exist out there, and then, think about the private groups, Discord servers and Slack and all of the communities that have now been formed. And I'm a member of several of them. We've become very splintered in that type of communication. So I think that's just the way of the future. I don't think there's no going back, or as they say, the toothpaste is out of the tube. And we just have to figure out and spend, maybe not even something has to give, maybe just spend time more efficiently on some of them, just to see where it is we should be and where we want to spend time.
Someone asked, maybe it was Cheryl in the chat, Roy, how do we get the attorneys on board with AI? I was coaching an attorney a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about he was having a hard time on how to reach out to this target that he wanted to have this conversation with and talk about the firm and all this other stuff. And so he's struggling, and I'm just listening to him. In the meantime, I go into ChatGPT. I do it in my own words because he was targeting a specific type of company in a country, and it came up with this letter, and that ChatGPT is banned at his firm, so he can't access it. So I sent it to him as we're talking, like literally in 1 minute. And I said, well, this came from ChatGPT. Don't use this, but this will help get your juices flowing. And he's just like, oh my God, and I'm like, so
It's a
like
fire starter.
finding like little ways to incorporate it into conversations and like we don't really want them to run loose with it yet because we don't want to get sued. But showing them like things like letters or outlines or your presentations to get your juices flowing. That's it. Like don't do anything else with it, So that was an example.
Yeah. It's a fire starter.
I love that term. I want to ask, because we're talking about right now being on like different types of social media, but I think nowadays a lot of social media as it pertains to legal marketing has become pay to play. How important do you guys think it is for law firms to be participating in this model? And do they need, like, is there still a way for people to exist doing it with, like, say they can't afford it or are just starting out? Like, what should we be looking at?
Well, Nick, how do you define pay to play?
Pay to play as in like paid ads, not even cost per click, but just sponsored content, cost per click, video ads, and anything where like you have to put a credit card down.
See, I'm not being contrary. I define pay to play a little differently. We don't do any pay to play in terms of paid advertorials or that kind of thing, or I hate to say Vanguard magazine, sorry if I get in trouble, those kind of places that just, or even the various lawyer lists that once they're on the list, I'm like, attorney, I'm going to get more traction on social media with this post about you than buying an ad in the publication, because the only people reading the publication are the people who are in the publication. So I say nay to all that kind of pay-to-play stuff. But we do invest in boosting our content on LinkedIn. We have, I don't know if you consider SEO pay-to-play, but, one could argue there's a version where you're really going in and saying, look, my content. So pay to play, by that definition, could be a very slippery slope. I do think marketers should invest in making sure their content has the reach it should to the right audience. So targeting is key, and the only way I know how to target, because we don't have a CRM at Clark Hill, that doesn't mean I want any calls from vendors. We don't, and it drives me bonkers. So I have to find another way to get that content in front of people. They chose not to spend that money on CRM, so I'm going to spend the money on targeted social and digital advertising. And account-based marketing, because that works. I don't really see that as pay-to-play. I see that as part of your marketing mix. You're investing in something in your marketing mix. So I'm not being argumentative, but I think you have to do that if you're a firm of a certain size, and even if you're on the smaller end, you can get a lot through organic, but you're still going to have to make some, even if it's a few $100 a month, I would still invest in the growth of your social platforms through investment in social posts myself.
Yeah, I totally understand why Roy is making this distinction. I mean, there are a lot of organizations and publications that engage in this really offensive conduct in the legal marketing world, where they say, pay us $5,000 for the honor of being listed in our business magazine, one that nobody reads, except for the other folks who also paid $5,000 to be listed in that magazine. And so we traditionally, in our little bubble, think of pay to play as that. Mm-hmm. I think what you might be referring to, Nick, as pay to play is paid media. So anytime that you're paying to increase the reach of your messaging, so that could be digital advertising, it could be social media advertising, it could be actual traditional advertising, billboards and print advertisements and things like that. So if we're excluding paid media, that leaves us with two other things. It leaves us with owned media, so our own owned brand assets, website, email content, blogging, things that we take ownership of. And there are certain, forms of owned media that I think have a lot of value. But really, I think the key and the most cost-effective marketing is your earned media. So anytime that you're getting out there and you're being quoted in a prominent legal publication or business publication about an issue that is pertinent to your practice area. Anytime your attorneys are writing articles that are getting published in third-party publications, that is providing third-party validation that you can't get with your owned media or your paid media. And it's free, other than the amount of effort that you're putting in to get placed in those publications. I am with a consumer-facing practice. We work on mostly sexual abuse and employment discrimination lawsuits. It's an extraordinarily high-profile practice area, and so we're fielding requests from journalists frequently about these issues that are breaking in the news media. And every single time that our attorneys are getting quoted in news publications, we get probably a dozen potential clients contacting us and saying, I saw you in Bloomberg and I'm wondering, if you can represent me in my case. So the ROI on earned media is huge. I also think that, anytime that you're out there in these third-party publications getting published, you just have this credibility that you don't get from your own owned media, and that credibility is key to building trust with your clients and referral sources.
Yeah. And to Jacob's point, that it becomes so important to take control of the message. And when I was in-house and we had a media panel, and I apologize to those of you who've had to suffer through this story already 10 times, but we had a media panel, and the local media consisting of trades, so legal trades, as well as just regular newspaper and TV. And lawyers were in the room, and we asked a question about, why don't you mention our firm name very much? You just vaguely refer to a lawyer. Why don't you mention the lawyer's name or the firm name? And they said, it's our job to report a story. It's not our job to give you promotional, whatever, for promotional space. And I remember the looks on, our lawyers' faces were like, oh, okay, got it. And that will never change. So the fact, I'm not saying that every journalist is like that. We do make it into trades more often by name, firm and lawyer. But I think what's important is that, and what I always say is that, put yourself out there, put your own story, put your knowledge, put the kind of work that you do, demonstrate it. You don't necessarily have to be, self-promotional when you do it, but the more that you talk about what you do, the more you give perspective on things when it's being discussed in a public forum, in public forums like social media, then you start to get that reputation and you've taken control of your message. But we never have been able to, and we never will be able to sit back and just hope that all of your lawyers will get noticed for the amazing work that they do. They have to, and those who are in marketing and business development can't do it all either. You can have wonderful public relations efforts. You can have great relationships with those who will blog or report on what your lawyers are doing, but that still won't do the job that every one of your lawyers needs to have done, and that's to let people who are important to them and to their practice understand about what they do. So I think they definitely need to continue to focus on owning their own message and sending it out on a constant basis. Because when people are ready, then they will somehow remember, oh, that's right. Lee writes about that every now and then. I need to go check out, I need to go do some research on Lee, which they'll do before they ever call her. So, I think there's nothing wrong with paid media. Mm-hmm. I mean, why can the rest of the world do it and be admired for it, and we can't do it? And talk about targeted and efficient. I mean, why not? But I think we have to make sure that our organic efforts are as robust and as strong as they can be and should be, and not to just say, oh, go buy some media, when people internally aren't doing their job sending their own messages as well.
Well, and you need the mix. I mean, Toni, go.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, too, I think, because this brings it back full circle to me, what we were talking about at the top of the program, about personal brand, right? Because when you're in a firm, all of the messages aren't equally important. All of them matter.
Right.
And so we often have attorneys who are like, oh, well, my thing is the most important thing in the world. That self-awareness is not present in their sense of understanding what the media wants to see. To Jacob's point, like some of the, matters and issues for which your firm is dealing with are present in our culture as compared to maybe some of the other discrete matters that occur. And so it's going to get different types, of media attention. So I think that's understanding the channels that best suit your messages and get to your target is going to be really important, and you elevating that also through your personal brand, just to bring it around.
That's exactly right. Oh yeah, I love that, Cheryl. All the attorneys I've worked with always want to be the number one search on Google, and we have those people too. And I try to find the words. Do you actually think someone's going to hire a corporate attorney because you came up on Google? No, they're gonna. I hope not. They're gonna, if they read an article that, and I think the other thing is it is about the marketing mix. And Toni was alluding to this, and I learned this the hard way in healthcare marketing. You need to have various levels of release valve for whoever's coming in with whatever information, and find the right home for it and say, I have something, I have a place I can put this. And I also am struck by, to your point, your original point, for those marketers that maybe don't have much budget and they aren't able to do some of maybe what I'm describing. Every firm I started in, I always heard marketing's not doing anything. And one of the first things I did was just set up my Google alerts for whatever media mentions we've got or attorneys that got mentioned. And if they don't say the Clark Hill name or the firm name on the media, I can repost it and make it very clear that they're part of Clark Hill. And I can put together a summary on a weekly basis going, did you know all this stuff's happening? Because sometimes you do have to market back internally and say, there's a lot of good stuff happening. And I think marketers do themselves a disservice because they're like, I don't have time for that. Make time for that. Distill out, here are the 20 media mentions we got, what happened, get them hipped on social media because they're going to find that stuff more fully, they'll share it, but you've got to have that mix. And so yes, you're going to have the attorney that brings you something that's like, I don't know what to do with this. We've come to go, that's a great thing for Instagram. And we put it on our Instagram stories and it disappears after a day and a half. I'm sorry.
Go put that on Tribal, that network where 10 people
and then they're like, oh, you did something with it. And only about every fifth one goes, it should be on LinkedIn. It's very important. And then I go, can we do it on a Saturday? You have to have your long-term vision in game, but you also have to earn the credibility and get things out where they are. And again, if you don't have much budget, work with what you got. Set up the Google alerts, send around a newsletter, and set up your social media, and get them sharing the content and excited to tell the story, because it's ultimately what they need to do.
I want to ask you all this before we run out of time, because this was something that we were really here for. I want to talk about what's next for legal marketing. I don't necessarily want you to predict the future, but what do you think is up next? What do you see coming right now that people might be underutilizing that's going to be big?
I would be remiss if I didn't first honor those who answered when I put a query on LinkedIn this morning asking this question that you were going to ask us. So I just want to thank Deb Dobson and Cheryl. And Cheryl, I keep pronouncing your last name to myself, Oftenberg, but I think I'm mispronouncing it, Roy. Am I mispronouncing Cheryl's last name? Okay, Cheryl, if you put it if you could put it.
I mispronounce everybody's name because they were my social media friends first. I didn't know Gina Rubel was Gina Rubel until 5 years later. I thought she was Gina Rubel.
No, I always say it that way to myself, so I apologize, Cheryl, if I'm wrong.
I'm looking at it right now, and I think you're good.
Oh, I'm right.
Oh, nice, Cheryl.
But I just wanted to give credit because I was crowdsourcing kind of at the last minute, but it was this morning, not so bad. And Deb Dobson said, and these are sort of really familiar, so the only reason I'm looking away is because I copied and pasted them here. Deb said, AI is here to stay, but will be interesting in terms of IP law. Been using it since January, but need to fact check and heavily edit. Amen. Cheryl Oftenberg, who I pronounced correctly. I'm sorry, I need to be careful. I'm getting used to a standing desk, and it tends to make me dance around a little bit too much. So Cheryl said, I wonder how marketers are going to work with AI. I think, Cheryl, you put this in the chat too. Work with AI, and if they'll have to convince their attorneys how this can benefit them. So first and foremost, thank you to both of you for putting those comments in there. Now, I'll stop so the rest of you can you can be futurists.
I suck at this game. I don't. I feel like we're living in the future right now. I mean, I think we talked a little bit about. I feel like it's a game of inches, not miles, and maybe it's just because this industry's corrupted me. I feel like the future is doing what we're doing now, but better, more efficiently, more effectively. and a more focused and targeted way. What I feel like maybe it's just because of my age and where I've been, I feel like I'm finally at a point with this firm where I can get them to actually focus on something that matters than a million different ideas. So I feel like the future is in our digital platforms. I feel like the future is in content generation. That's not anything that's going to be groundbreaking. We're selling lawyers and law firms. I wish I were selling tennis shoes sometimes. I'm selling that. So what I sell is what's in their brains. And for me, the best way I know how to do that is to get their content out there, their voices out there. I think we should continue to see a diversification in using video, using audio, using podcasting, getting a bespoke fit for the attorneys working with the willing, the ones that are able to take these things up. And I want to note, Cheryl made a point. Typically, marketing is doing everything and is overwhelmed. It's a matter of priority. And I responded, fair point, but I often find marketers are more overwhelmed by the potential to be overwhelmed than actually being overwhelmed. There is this tendency in marketing. We have rules. If we do this for one, we're going to do it for all, and we're going to be so overwhelmed by all the... Not usually. Usually you pick a bigger fight saying no to somebody than by going, what can I do with this? And is there an idea baked in this that I don't see, but could really unlock in this individual a marketing superpower that they haven't found before? So I just caution marketers, yes, look at all the new stuff, get excited, but you're creating your own sense of being overwhelmed because you got to just deal with your day job sometimes. And if you execute beautifully on that and do it well and follow the principles we've highlighted, to me, that's the course. But again, I'm getting old, so.
Stop saying that. That is not
I
true.
feel it. Feel it in my bones.
You're not. You just had a bad meeting today. Or challenging meeting.
It really wasn't a bad meeting. That's going to be, everyone's going to be,
It
no, it was a very good meeting, but it was exhausting.
Intense. Yeah. The future, I'm with Roy and then with everything all of you said today, because I think that what I've seen in the years that I've been in legal marketing and business development is that as a group, as a whole, we've become so sophisticated in what we do and how we think. And we have completely upped the game in terms of the maturity of legal marketing and business development as professions and as industries. And I think we will continue to see that. I think we will continue to challenge ourselves. The tools are out there. We don't have any choice but to continue to challenge ourselves. And I think those who accept that challenge and say, yes, I understand, being strategic and helping our lawyers understand what they need to do their jobs better will never stop. I think we will just become much more sophisticated and will continue to mature in the skills that we have. I think what needs to happen is that, and this has happened since I started, is that we need more of a groundswell of our lawyers doing those things though too, because the ones that are doing it are finding success and they're getting their name out there and they're building their reputations and their relationships, which has a huge impact on the growth of their practice. So I think that there's a wave that needs to happen, that needs to continue to happen, where the wake-up call that happened during the pandemic, and that will probably continue because of economic threats, will cause lawyers to say, all right, I need to step up just a little bit more. I don't like it, or maybe I love it, depending on who it is. Just show me how to do it. Don't give me a bunch of choices. Just show me how to do it, and I'll do it. So I think it's more of the same, but just in a more sophisticated and mature, not in terms of a person, but just knowledge-wise, mature way.
To Nancy's point, I recently moderated a panel discussion for LMA Southeast, and we were talking about practice management for marketing and business development professionals. And there are more professionals that were in marketing and business development that are now going into practice management. And I think future-wise, attorneys, law firm leaders will expect the marketing and business development profession to know more about the financial hygiene of a firm, know how a firm makes money, know how to do more of the business, and that we do some business, but really know more about the business of the firm and lead in a very different way. I do believe that is where the profession is going.
And Lee, that is so interesting because our counterparts outside of legal have been tasked with that for decades. And it's not, I'm not saying it's our fault that it hasn't happened. It's just the culture that has existed for a very long time. But stepping up and asking to have that seat at that table is doing what our counterparts have been doing for a very long time. We're in business.
Yes.
And to not have a part in those business discussions, whatever is standing in the way needs to be kicked right out of the way.
Exactly.
I'm going to jump in very quickly with my prediction, and it's really an extension of what you all are saying. What I hope for the legal marketing industry is that law firm marketing is seen as a highly sought after career path, in the same way that being a doctor or a lawyer or an investment banker is. I mean, there are so many opportunities that in this industry that are both rewarding and highly lucrative. And so I think it's really incumbent on all of us to continue to advocate for ourselves, advocate for our profession, advocate for our lawyers, really get in front of college students early, and then this industry will be seen as a highly coveted career path, much like any other.
Great.
I love that. So that's all the time we have for this discussion. I would like to thank Jacob Eidinger, Lee Watts, Nancy Myrland, Roy Sexton, and Toni Wells for joining me today.